Our story continues. Mendel knew full well that his older brother Odyssian would be angry with him. To him, of course, this was all Achilleos' fault. He should have known better than to tempt his curiosities. In truth, Odyssian could have easily passed for Mendel's uncle or father. He knew little of what his father looked like, save for a few mentions by Cyrus or Tibian, or what a few of the town's elders might have said, many of which say that Odyssian could have easily passed for his twin in both looks and in manners. Mendel did look quite different from his brother, strengthened by the necessities of farm life, yes, but he was still half a foot shorter and not nearly as mighty or as large.
"Well, what do you make of it?"
Achilleos said. It looks ancient, Mendel replied. It was all Mendel could muster, which was odd for him. Even Achilleos could sense the odd bit of silence between them, but the hunter nodded, as if listening to a sage. He treated Mendel as a font of knowledge, even if he was at least half a decade younger than him.
"The thing is,"
Achilleos paused, running his hand through his hair.
I've been through this area many a time, and I swear, it's never been here before."
Mendel only nodded, his attention fixed on his companion's find. Mendel peered closely at the symbols etched into the face of this object. It was worn in many places by weather and age. Clearly this object had long since suffered the effects of time and nature, and yet, how was it that Achilleos had never seen it before? Had it only just appeared?
The strange cubed object stood a little wider than the length of a foot, and about as high as his knee. It should have been impossible to miss this stone object,
Mendel thought to himself, touching the ground around the object. Nothing of recent changed in the surroundings.
"No,"
Achilleos replied. Mendel leaned closer and ran his fingers reverently over some of the symbols. He sensed incredible age. Or perhaps, was it agelessness? How could such a thing be possible, he thought.
The stone was black, but the markings were like an engraved silver, glittering and etched into it. That kind of skill was not home to anyone in Sarum, or perhaps anyone in the entire western region,
Mendel thought to himself. Mendel soon realized that Achilleos was shaking him. "What?" he said. The archer leaned warily over him, his brow furrowed.
"It's just, the moment you touched it, you seemed to still. You didn't blink, and I swear you didn't breathe."
I didn't notice." He was tempted to touch it again, but figured Achilleos would not approve. "Did you touch it earlier?"
"Yes,"
Achilleos replied. "But the same thing did not happen to you, did it?" Achilleos went pale with memory.
No.
"Then what? Did you feel anything?"
I felt an emptiness, Mendel. It reminded me of death."
Mendel felt this was more ominous based on how Achilleos said it. "What about death?" in an almost eager tone. "Can you describe it better? Was it—" Achilleos suddenly slashed away the conversation with his hand.
"That's all. I went for you right after that,"
Achilleos stated. Clearly, there was much more involved, but Odyssian's brother did not push any further on the matter. Mendel wished that he could take the stone with him and study it at his leisure back at the farm. His head shot up, now being reminded of the farm and Odyssian. I have to get back. Odyssian will be wondering where I am." He hated disappointing his brother, even though Odyssian would never show such emotions. Nevertheless, Mendel lived with the memories of the terrible burdens that Odyssian had to bear, with the sickness and later deaths of their loved ones. Achilleos, gesturing to the stone.
"What about that? Do we just leave it like that?"
Mendel pondered for a bit. We shall cover it up. Help me with it." They covered it with branches and leafy shrubbery, but Mendel still felt that the object lay naked to the world. As Mendel focused back on the path, he noticed that the weather had taken a very odd and sudden turn. The day had been bright before, but now clouds began to gather in earnest to the west as if in preparation of a major storm. "That's odd," Achilleos murmured. "It is, yes," Mendeln replied. He did not understand the weather in the way that it affected hunting, like his companion did, or the way that his brother Odyssian did regarding crops and farmlands. He saw the weather in measurements and currents. Odyssian normally didn't care for the way Mendeln saw things from time to time, but he couldn't deny that once in a while he had helped come up with ideas that eased their tasks a bit back at home. The weather now seemed to rapidly thicken and intensify even more. Mendeln and Achilleos said nothing, but at one point they both glanced back in the direction of the stone and wondered. Odyssian had also noticed the peculiar shift in the weather and figured that regardless of when his brother would return, they would most likely be heading home in the rain. But he hoped that it would hold for just a time more, before releasing its full force. As Odyssian continued to wait, his mind drifted back to the face framed in gold. Even though he had only seen her twice, he knew he would not soon forget the vision of her. Something deep within Odyssian made him want to protect her. Lilia. The name rolled in his mind over and over, his thoughts savoring the almost musical beauty of pronouncing it. The sky rumbled, jarring him back. A flash of green caught his attention off in the distance, but not the green that made up the hunter's woodland garments. Rather, it was the emerald green that Lilia wore. She was seen walking off into the woods just beyond the outskirts of town, almost as if she was oblivious to the threat from above. Odyssian secured his wagon and headed in after her. He seemed to almost want to run after her out of concern, his heart pounding with the chance of getting to speak to her just once more. Lilia seemed fixed on her path, and despite Odyssian's pace, he did not manage to catch up to her until well into the woods. Odyssian did not want to startle her by reaching out to her, so instead he cleared his throat.
"Oh, 'tis you,"
Lilia replied.
"Forgive me, my lady."
"I thought I told you. To you, I'm Lilia. What I once was, I can never be again. But what do I call you, Sir Farmer?"
Realizing he had not introduced himself,
"I am Odyssian, son of Diomedes."
The thunder continuing to rumble above them.
"My Lilia, you shouldn't be out here. There seems to be a fierce storm brewing. Best if you seek shelter, likely in the tavern. It's one of the strongest buildings in Sarum."
"A storm?"
Lilia said, glancing upward. The clouds had thickened to the point that the day almost seemed to turn to night. Odyssian taking hold of Lilia's wrist.
"Quickly, there doesn't look to be much time."
The noblewoman turned her gaze in another direction, standing frozen, as if whatever caught her attention shocked her senseless.
"Lilia? Lilia, what is it?"
I thought, but no.
"What is it? What did you see?"
There.
She pointed at a particularly dense area of woods.
I think?
Odyssian drawing his knife and moving towards the area that Lilia mentioned.
"Stay here,"
he told her. As he neared the area that Lilia had mentioned, a sense of dread rushed over him, nearly causing the stalwart farmer to backtrack. A faint but sickly scent wafted under his nose and brought back memories of plague and death. The sight before him made the farmer fall to one knee. It was all he could do to keep his last meal in his stomach. His knife slipped out of his hand, utterly forgotten in the face of such a horrific sight. By Odyssian's estimations, what had been once a man now lay strewn across the patch of ground before him, his entire torso expertly sliced open, much the way a farmer might a cow right after slaughter. Much of the immediate vicinity was now crimson, filled with innards, clustered with flies, with a tremendous stench-ridden bounty. The throat had also been sliced open sideways, in a gap large enough to admit a fist. The face was covered in blood and wounds, like some bizarrely decorated festival display. It was difficult to identify, but the shredded garments and symbols left nearby left little doubt whatsoever. Odyssian had found Brother Caligio, the missing acolyte from the Triune. Odyssian heard a gasp from behind him, Lilia's eyes wide, taking in the awful sight. Her eyes fluttered upward, showing only whites. She began to fall. Odyssian, leaping forward, managed to catch her just before she hit the ground. Odyssian then hefted her to one of his shoulders and headed towards town. The sky continued to thunder loudly in the background, but the storm had so far held back. As he reached the edge of town, "Odyssian!" Mendel said. Mendel and Achilleos were now rushing up to him, a great fear having been lifted after seeing his little brother safe. As the pair approached Odyssian, he immediately growled at Achilleos.
"There's a body out in the woods behind me, near where the forest first thickens."
"An accident?" Achilleos replied.
"No."
Achilleos, grimly nodding. He pulled a bolt from his quiver and without a moment's notice raced off into the woods. What of her? Who is she? Is she harmed in any way? Mendel said.
"She fainted. She saw the body too."
"Should we take her to Jorilia?" Mendel said. Jorilia was Saram's healer woman, an elderly figure some believed to be half-witch, but no one argued that her skills were to be respected. It was she who actually helped Odyssian's family during the plague that had at least eased some of the agony his family felt, which had done far more than all the prayers combined.
"She needs to rest. She must have a room at the Boar's Head."
Hesitating a bit.
"But we can't bring her in through the front door like this."
"There is a back way near the steps leading to the upper rooms. You could take her through there while I go speak quietly with Tibian in order to find out which one is hers."
"We'll do that,"
Odyssian replied. Odyssian wanting to get Lilia to safety, heading towards the back door of the Boar's Head, feeling satisfied in the plan and that Achilleos would certainly contact the guard or headman of Saram about the body. Mendel left him as they neared the back of the tavern. Odyssian had managed to get the noblewoman inside without losing his grip once. Waiting at the top of the staircase, Mendel finally reached Odyssian. "She has no quarters here, so I had to arrange some with our credit. Was that all right?" Odyssian nodded.
"Which one?"
Mendel pointed to the lone door farthest from the rest. "This one is more private." As they entered, "She must have belongings that belong with the caravan. Shall I go to Sarinthia and take care of it?" Mendel asked. Odyssian not wanting to involve others in the situation, but seeing no other choice.
"Go ahead."
As Mendel headed off, he paused by the door. "How do you know this woman?"
"We met by chance."
Odyssian glanced at Lilia, pondering the perfection of her and wondering why she was wandering alone in the world. She could have easily found a good marriage from many wealthy nobles, but just then, Lilia's eyes opened and she bolted into a sitting position.
What happened?"
"Do you remember the woods?"
Lilia, gasping.
"So, it was all true then? What I saw?
Odyssian nodding.
And you brought me here. Where is here?"
"The Boar's Head. It's the only inn in Saram, Miss Lilia. We thought you likely had a room here."
"But I do not."
"My brother took care of that. Then we brought you up here. After that, Mendel went to retrieve your things from the caravan."
Lilia was looking right at Odyssian.
"Mendel and your brother. They're the same person, I gather."
"Yes."
Lilia nodding to herself.
"And the body?"
"Friend is looking into that. He can be trusted to deal with the matter properly. Achilleos will alert the guard, then our headman."
"Was the man we found, was he also a friend of yours?"
"Him? A damned missionary from the Temple of the Triune. His companions were looking for him earlier. They came with the caravan. Did you?"
"I saw them, yes, but never spoke. I have little trust in their teachings, or that of the cathedral for that matter."
Thinking that he should speak to the town's elders of the situation and not wanting to involve Lilia further in the matter.
"Stay here and rest. I'll have to see those who will deal with the body. You needn't come."
"But I should be there, shouldn't I?"
"Only if necessary. You merely saw what I saw, after all. You didn't know him either."
"Very well,"
she said.
"If that is what you wish, I will wait until I hear from you."
"Good."
He started to leave when Lilia called out and thanked him just before he left the door. It had been some time since Saram had even had a murder. Even so, he knew that once this grisly news would reach the townspeople, they would never be the same. This was no mere drunken altercation like that of 4 years ago. This was a beastly, monstrous butchery of life. The people of Sarum would be more than willing to search for the bastard in earnest. As Odyssian reached for the door to exit the tavern,
"There! That is the man with whom I speak."
Odyssian was somewhat at a loss for words. Tiberius and Dorius were at the door to greet him, along with more than a dozen men. Most of them were from the guard, but also Achilleos, and 2 other acolytes from the Temple of the Triune. Recovering, Odyssian said,
Did you tell them everything?
Dorius interjected.
"You do not speak with him, Hunter. Not yet. Not until all the facts are known,"
Dorius said. "The facts are known," a Triune emissary said in a seething tone. "You are the one responsible. Your words brand you. Confess for the sake of your soul." Odyssian fought to keep his temper in check, but the thought of being accused of the very murder that he had been trying to warn them about was simply ridiculous.
Me? You think I did it? By the stars, I should take you and...
Odyssian, please, murmured Achilleos. The son of Diomedes regained control.
Achilleos, I told you where to find the body. You saw my expression and...
He halted, not wishing to mention Lilia.
And you know me, Dorius. You were friends with my father. I swear by his grave that I am not the fiend who so foully slew this jabbering fool's comrade.
Dorius waved him silent.
"'Tis not him that we speak about at the moment, Odyssian. Nay, we speak of the other, though it might very well be that we'll be returning to that before long, as I don't believe in coincidences,"
Dorius said.
Other? What other?
Odyssian replied. Tiberius snapped his fingers, and a half-dozen men surrounded Odyssian. Achilleos, trying to intercede.
Dorius, is this really necessary? This is Odyssian.
"Your words are respected, young Achilleos, but this is duty. I'm certain that it will all be working out for Odyssian. Just let us do what the situation demands."
But for what? What is this?
Odyssian said.
"For the possibility of murdering a man."
Odyssian roaring.
But I told you, I did not slay his companion.
"'Tis not him we're speaking about,"
Dorius replied.
"but it is of a similar calling, which makes this worse, young Odyssian. It's the one hailing from the Cathedral of Light who's been found slain."
The one...
Odyssian's thoughts now in turmoil, recalling that he had spoken to the man not but an hour ago, spoken to him and threatened him in the process in front of several witnesses. Dorius continued.
"Ah, you recall him, I see. Yes, young Odyssian, the honored emissary of the cathedral was found, with his throat cut open, and 'tis your knife jutting out of the gape made."